I feel as though there was a point in time where gaming was a unifying force amongst society, or at least our fragment of society that was nerd culture, where it didn't inherently matter what your race, gender, background, whatever your differences were, even careers. Video games specifically, and gaming as a whole, used to be this hobby where people would come together to enjoy this common hobby or do a common goal, such as a raid in World of Warcraft, or players would sit down at a table to play Dungeons and Dragons. And I feel as though in this time of political instability and emotional volatility online, as you see more people becoming infected with being terminally online, you see this being less the case. And I feel as though gamers are, as a whole, losing the culture war to the powers that be when it comes to the politicization in games, and I want to talk a little bit more about that today. Maybe a little bit of what we could do to fix it too. What's up, folks? Moon here. If you're new to the channel, I'm a World of Warcraft player. I love World of Warcraft, but I also love keeping it real and just talking about some IRL topics from time to time. So today we're going to be talking about probably the most difficult topic that I've had to talk about, because people, they'll see the title, they'll see the thumbnail of this video, and you immediately feel something emotional towards this topic in general. And so I'm going to try and keep it neutral when I package this video, because we really need to approach this topic with a level head if we're going to find any resolve, or if we're going to have any meaningful discussion on this. So let's talk about the politicization of games. We have seen over the past couple of years this sort of us versus them, where you get these subsections of online gaming communities, and they almost become political groups in a way. They used to not really influence each other as much. So let's give an example. At least in World of Warcraft, right? You've now got the PvP versus PvE debacle, or raiding versus Mythic Plus, which is better, or it used to be Alliance versus Horde, but that's, I feel like, a different section because that doesn't really influence gameplay a whole lot. And it becomes a sort of parallel to modern politics. Okay, let's break it down a little bit further. So at least in the inception of World of Warcraft, you had your two factions. You had Alliance and Horde, and there was a lot of, rivalry and discourse amongst Alliance and Horde players, but it wasn't something that was so severe where it caused the absolute mental crash out of people like we see online nowadays, because at the end of the day, it didn't matter what faction you were playing, the core gameplay experience was relatively the same. Now, the nuance to that was a PvP server, where whenever you had a largely homogenous PvP server with one side completely outbalancing the other side, it wasn't fun for either party. And it's almost like the servers that have the best balance are the servers that are the most fulfilling to play in. And over time, as the game progressed, you saw the factions become less important. With the more recent expansion and the next expansion that's launching, the faction barriers completely dropped when it comes to joining a guild. So now all it really is more of an aesthetic thing, outside of like queuing for instance content. But let's be real here, like, give it another expansion or two and I think they'll fix that too. But the whole us versus them mentality has gotten to the point where players develop such insane takes when it comes to their corner of the game and their opinion on the entire game, where if you were to listen to like a hardcore Mythic Plus player and a hardcore PvP player talk about the game, you would think that they're playing completely different video games, that they're not playing the same game of World of Warcraft. And again, there's a lot of parallels to real life in this instance too. But let me go to my next point, which I believe is something that suffered the most corruption, the most poisoning, and that is the politicization of characters and storylines as a whole. So the initiative of diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI for short, we've seen it absolutely not work. I don't blame people inherently for having this sort of like altruistic lens, but because the way it was executed was antagonistic in nature underneath the guise of being virtuous, it has driven a further rift in the gaming community, where as opposed to developing new characters centered around a good story, a good background, people instead decided to take immutable characteristics and put that as the focal point of a character's identity, because the optics of it looked better than telling a unique and original story. Additionally, what they did was they took existing characters, they took existing franchises, and they hijacked the original character and storyline to make it fit their narrative and their worldview through this supposed lens. So then when that upsets people, and rightfully so, rather than trying to take a look at their movement to see what the hell went wrong when they were trying to execute this. They instead pass the blame to the people who are upset with their movement. And that doesn't do any good either, because you're continuously driving that rift further. Now it's unfortunately gotten to the point where if you do want a character that has a different immutable characteristic, but it's not being sold as part of their central identity, people just straight up are not going to believe you, and people are going to think that it's done for checking a box as opposed to trying to tell an original story. I do feel if we're going to get specifically out of this hole that we've driven ourselves in with the whole DEI initiative, we do just need to remove the initiative outright and instead focus on creating these characters with original good stories, just so happen to have these immutable characteristics. Because at the end of the day, players can relate to a good story because a good story of a character overcoming a challenge is more unifying than trying to focus the character's whole story on their arbitrary characteristics. And while there may be niche cases where a story around these characteristics can be a thing, these should be very rare in the grander scheme of things. And that sort of leads me to my next point, where games contain a fanatical aspect to it that allows people to separate themselves from the shitty reality of their day-to-day life, where the character that you play isn't necessarily you, and it shouldn't be a version of you that's completely one-to-one, but it has aspects and traits of yourself that maybe you want to keep, or maybe you intentionally want to play a character that's completely different from yourself because it does contribute to that escapism. So when you have these storylines and when you have these other characters that are so reflective of the real world and so injected with political narratives, and you try to match that with a player base who just wants escapism, you get a large amount of conflict and you get a large amount of cognitive dissonance because the two they mix like water and oil. So then let's talk about the gaming space as a whole, and I've seen this specifically when it comes to WoW Twitter, just because that's the side of gaming that I'm exposed to, is that you have seen recently people become very unhinged with the things they say, where at least when I was growing up and going through elementary school, we learned about a digital footprint, about how when you post something, anybody can archive it and it will be on the internet forever. This wasn't but 11, 12 years ago. So you look at the types of things that people say, and you wonder, what is this person's ideology? What is this person's thought process? And how did this person get to such a point where they're just comfortable with saying the most insane extremist rhetoric online, seemingly without consequence? And that is largely due to echo chambers. Now, everybody, you hear this word echo chambers and people rush to the comments section. They're like, yes, I know exactly of, this person and that person and so and your grandma's dog who's fallen from grace because got into an echo chamber on Twitter, and damn that Twitter, and I've completely lost this person because this person's become a shell of themselves. And the large thing that I want to say regarding this topic is that people use those word echo chamber all the time like a buzzword, because people will recognize when other people are in one, but they will not recognize when they are in one themselves. As somebody who is more like, I guess, towards the middle when it comes to my worldview, I have gotten to the point where I can recognize when my algorithm is putting me into an echo chamber, and I will instead try to customize and tailor my algorithm by liking either complete neutral posts like pictures of space or like cats or dogs or whatever, or I will try and get some viewpoints that don't align with mine and like that to where my algorithm gets a little bit more balanced. Because when I have fallen deep into echo chambers before, I've noticed that I've become a significantly more angry, a significantly more volatile person. I've noticed that I get drained significantly quicker when I'm in one. And I've noticed that my own viewpoint will temporarily be hijacked, and I will just think of the most insane out there stuff of a specific group of people. And that group of people has changed before, depending on if it's went left or right or center or whatnot. But my heart hurts for these people who they will get so lost in the sauce, if you will, where they will fall so deep in the echo chamber, and rather than fighting their way out, they are perfectly happy and content, and they feel justified swimming in the shit that they've sunk themselves into. Because I don't know what type of existence this bodes for people, or what this sort of ideal world they envision is supposed to be like. And I feel like people have become just so disconnected from reality where this isn't even a thing that crosses their mind. But I truly believe when we are able to start having conversations with people that we don't agree with over the medium of something we do enjoy together and we do agree with, like a video game we like, we'll find that we have a lot more in common than we give ourselves credit for. I will give you an example right now. Not even a few months ago, I was in this guild in World of Warcraft, and there was another guild member and we were online late at night, and I was just farming some herbs for some alchemy. I was trying to get my potion making skills up, but it was just another guild member and I in this Discord call at 2 in the morning. And I don't know how exactly we got there, but the conversation over time started to drift towards these real world, more heavy topics. And rather than myself getting emotionally charged at something I didn't agree with, I instead decided to just ask a question. I used non-combative language. I just asked questions. I asked for clarification. I shared my perspective in a way that was as neutral as I could. And I found that this guild member and we were able to have this connection. The core point is that despite our differences, we were still able to develop this sort of connection because we were enjoying playing the game of World of Warcraft together. Now, eventually we started doing Mythic Plus dungeons, and I was teaching him how to do Mythic Plus, and it was a good time because we didn't only talk about politics. We were able to talk a lot about the game and about what our hobbies were and what got us into playing this specific video game. And truly, this is something that I wish more players got to experience. But unfortunately, I feel as though this is an effect of gaming becoming less communal as a whole. I know, at least in my video of I miss old World of Warcraft, or what happened to guilds in World of Warcraft, a lot of the feedback that I was getting was that just over time, the game became less communal and more oriented towards solo play, where you don't really need a guild, you don't need an online community anymore, you don't need other players to be able to find success in an MMO. But personally, I don't like it that the game has gone in this direction. And a lot of people are going to be like, oh, well, just don't play the game. I'm still going to play the game because, I can still create that community and I can still have that fun with people and build these bridges and enjoy the commonality of this video game that I've been playing for 16 years now. But I can still lament the fact that it used to be better in that sense. Now, granted, WoW has gotten a lot better by cleaning up its UI, and it's gotten a lot better with respecting your time in general, but I do miss that community aspect of gaming, and I find that it's a lot more difficult to create that avenue for connection in a game where that just simply isn't needed anymore, because if you don't need to, why bother doing it? This video is going to probably come off a little bit more charged and as a shock to my core base than I normally am. But this is a topic that I am very passionate about because for so long, these voices that are driving factors in continuously dividing and splitting the gaming community further and injecting it with the poison of politics has become, it creates a greater need for people to take a stand and start preaching that the message of unity is still one that's good. But if we are going to achieve this goal in the long time, we have to be willing to bridge to the other side. And it sucks because it is a lot more fun to be delivering the punches than receiving them. A lot of people think that you're stupid, you're naive, you're foolish if you try to build a bridge, or if you just simply don't play into this factionalism and the petty politics of it all. But if you're able to stand on your business and not give a shit, you'll notice that you feel a lot more liberated and you feel a lot more free. And you'll notice that it's easier to have connections with other people and it's easier to feel empathy. But that'll do it for today's video. It's not really as World of Warcraft related as I'd like, but it'll do for today because this is something I feel like I really do need to talk about. As always, if you enjoy this type of content, it would mean a lot if you could support my channel. But until next time, this is Moon, signing out.